After 300 years of Spanish rule, only a few thousand Mexican settlers had migrated to what is now Texas. After 1820, that changed. Texas became an important region in Mexico, and then as an independent republic. The mission system used in Spain declined after Mexico had won independence from Spain in 1821. After freeing the missions from Spanish control, the Mexican government offered the surrounding lands to government officials and to ranchers to make the land more secure and stable. The Mexican government also encouraged Americans to settle in Texas as well. Many Americans rushed at the chance to buy inexpensive land in Texas, and the population of Anglo, or English-speaking, settlers from the United States soon surpassed the population of Tejanos, or Mexican settlers who lived in Texas. Among the more prominent leaders of these American settlers was Stephen Austin. Austin's father, Moses Austin, had received a land grant from Spain to establish a colony between the Brazos and Colorado rivers, but he had died before he was able to carry out his plan. Stephen obtained permission first from Spain and then from Mexico, after it had won its independence, to carry out his father's project. In 1821, he established a colony where no drunkard, no gambler, no profane swearer, and no idler would be allowed. The main settlement of the colony was named San Felipe de Austin, in Stephen's honor. By 1825, Austin had issued 297 land grants to the group that later became known as the Texas Old 300. Each family received either 177 very inexpensive acres of farmland or 4,428 acres for stock grazing, as well as a 10-year exemption from paying taxes. "I'm convinced," Austin said, "that I could take on 1,500 families as easily as 300 if I was permitted to do so." By 1830, there were more than 20,000 Americans in Texas. Despite peaceful cooperation between Anglos and Tejanos, differences over cultural issues intensified between Anglos and the Mexican government. The overwhelmingly Protestant Anglo settlers spoke English instead of Spanish, and furthermore, many of the settlers were Southerners who had brought slaves with them to Texas. Mexico had abolished slavery in 1829, and it insisted in vain that the Texans free their slaves. Meanwhile, Mexican politics had been increasingly become unstable. Austin had traveled to Mexico City late in 1833 to present petitions to the Mexican president, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, for a greater self-government for Texas. But while Austin was on his way home, Santa Anna had Austin imprisoned for inciting revolution. After Santa Anna suspended local powers in Texas and other Mexican states, several rebellions broke out, including one that would be known as the Texas Revolution. When Austin returned to Texas in 1835, he was convinced that war was its only resource. Determined to force Texas to obey Mexican law, Santa Anna marched his army towards San Antonio. At the same time, Austin and his followers issued a call for Texans to arm themselves. Remember the Alamo. The commander of the Anglo troops, Lieutenant Colonel William Travis, moved his men into the Alamo, a mission in a fort in the center of San Antonio, which, by the way, you can go visit today. Travis believed that maintaining control over the Alamo would prevent Santa Anna's movement further north. From February 23, 1836, Santa Anna and his troops attacked the rebels holed up in the Alamo. On March 2nd of 1836, as the battle for the Alamo raged, Texans declared their independence from Mexico and quickly ratified a constitution based on that of the United States. The 13-day siege finally ended on March 6th of 1836 when Mexican troops scaled the Alamo's walls. All 187 U.S. defenders and hundreds of Mexicans died. Later in March, Santa Anna's troops were executed. Later in March, Santa Anna's troops executed 300 rebels at Goliad. The Alamo and the Goliad executions whipped the Texan rebels into a fury, and 6 weeks after the defeat at the Alamo, the rebel commander-in-chief, Sam Houston, and 900 soldiers surprised a group of Mexicans near the San Jacinto River. With shouts of "Remember the Alamo," the Texans killed 630 of Santa Anna's soldiers in 18 minutes and captured Santa Anna himself. The Texans set Santa Anna free only after he signed the Treaty of Velasco, which granted independence to Texas. In September of 1836, Sam Houston was elected president of the new Republic of Texas. Texas moves toward the Union. Most Texans hoped that the United States would annex their republic, but U.S. opinion divided along sectional lines. Southerners wanted Texas in order to extend slavery, which had already been established there. But Northerners feared that the annexation of more slave territory would tip the uneasy balance in the Senate in favor of slave states and prompt war with Mexico. In 1844, U.S. presidential campaign focused on westward expansion, and the winner, James Polk, a slaveholder, firmly favored the annexation of Texas.